Notice that the granite blocks exhibit a remarkable level of magnetism, which is extremely unusual for granite. They showed how magnets can effectively stick to the vertical walls, demonstrating the high magnetic pull of the site. Additionally, the initial results of the ground-penetrating radar discovered another strange anomaly. It appears that the wall continues 15 feet below the ground, and there, right in front of the wall, there's a perfectly flat foundation, which is highly unlikely to be a natural formation. Fascinating.
South of Utah, there is a geological mystery, square rocks of New Point. These towering, almost perfect limestone cubes, date back to the Eocene epoch, around 56 million years ago. Each formation reaches an astonishing height of 20 to 33 feet. Scientists explain that this is not a natural phenomenon, but rather the work of humans. The question remains, how did they plan to transport these blocks, and what were they meant to build? In the south of Utah.
You know, Doc, it's gonna be a hell of a long walk back to Hill Valley from here.
Still the safest plan. After all, we can't risk sending you back into a populated area or to a spot that's geographically unknown. You don't want to crash into some tree that once existed in the past. You don't want to crash into some tree that once existed in the past.
Yeah, Doc.
In May of 1912 at Lake Delavan, Wisconsin, a lost race of giants was dug up at a burial mound site. The dig site was overseen by Beloit College and included more than 200 effigy mounds. Here's an article on May 3rd in the New York Times saying strange skeletons found, linking the large skeletons to a lost tribe that lived in Wisconsin. It's said that these skeletons had 6 fingers and 6 toes, just like in 2 Samuel 21 verse 20, which says in still another battle which took place at Gath, there was a huge man with 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot, 24 in all. He was also descended from Rapha, or giants. In the news article, we see that someone from the State Historical Museum will investigate the discoveries within a few days. This happened at every giant burial site, in which case the giant bones were taken, never talked about again, or destroyed. In May of
Dude, and then we got giants all over North America. A huge giant cover-up. I haven't even gone through this book yet. I need to. I've just been doing straight Bible, but yeah, there's giants all over the place in the USA. There's one. This guy found one like in his backyard, dug it up, and then they took it from him. But then like a couple years later, he made a replica of what he found, or what he thinks whatever. There's also the 6-finger toad and 6-finger giant that was found in America. That's also found in the Bible. Can't remember what tribe. It was Amorite, I think. But then you got the Federal Reserve down in Jekyll Island. That was founded on top of the burial remains of an Indian tribe that were known to be giants and do ritual sacrifices, just like the Canaanites and the other tribes. I can't remember the Canaanites for sure, but yeah, something's going on. We got giants running around with 6 fingers, 6 toes, doing ritual sacrifices here in America, and there's a big old cover-up about it. That is interesting.
L'Enfant was a Freemason. He subdivided the city into a brilliant array of Kabbalistic symbols and numerics. Perhaps his best-known device is the pattern that is L'Enfant was a Freemason. He subdivided the city into a brilliant array of Kabbalistic symbols and numerics. Perhaps his best-known device is the pattern that is discerned when a straight line is drawn from the White House along Connecticut Avenue to DuPont Circle, then along Massachusetts Avenue to Mount Vernon Square, then back across K Street to Washington Circle, then up Rhode Island Avenue to Logan Circle, then along Vermont Avenue back to the White House. What results is a perfect pentagram, the Queen of Heaven's 8-year and 1-day celestial journey. But L'Enfant's pentagram points downward, forming the shape of Baphomet, the Gnostic absorption into wisdom goat's head icon of the Knights Templar. Gnostic historian Manly Hall says the upside-down pentagram is used extensively in black magic and always signifies a perverted power. The Baphomet imposed upon the federal city by Pierre Charles L'Enfant puts the mouth of this perverted power exactly at the White House. The presence of perverted power is underscored in L'Enfant's numbering of Washington city blocks. The 600 series of blocks runs in a swath from Q Street north through the Capitol grounds down to the mouth of James Creek below V Street south. All the numbers between 600 and 699 are assigned to blocks within this swath, except for the number 666. That number is missing from the map. It must have been secretly affixed to the only unnumbered section of blocks in the 600 series. That section we find includes the Capitol grounds that once were called Rome. Of course, 666 is the number of the name of the beast, mentioned in the 13th chapter of Revelation. If America's Temple of Jupiter sits upon the beast named 666, could it be that the true founding fathers soberly recognized Congress as the great whore of Revelation 17:1?
The Timucua chiefs. And they knew they were chiefs just from different things that were buried with them. So all of a sudden I look and I realize, man, these guys are really tall. And I commented to the guy that, you know, how tall are these guys? They look unusually large. And he said, yeah, they're all about 8 or 8.5 foot tall. I was like, well, that doesn't seem like a normal Native American, especially the tribes that I'm familiar with. He said all the Timucuas were unusually tall, even the women. And he said we found other skeletons and, you know, parts of bones out in the grounds, and he said we got pretty good evidence that nearly all of them were extraordinarily tall. And I said, well, what is, you know, how do you explain that in relation to other tribes on the Atlantic coast who were not? He said, I don't know. It is an unusual anomaly. He said, oh, by the way, I've got a painting that you might want to see. It's actually the copy of the original. We've got it under lock and key. But he said, I got a painting that actually shows the Indians from a group of French colonists that came to the United States before it was the U.S. This was right after Columbus. He said that it was the first colony of French folks that came over to try to establish a colony on the coast. And he said they landed in Jekyll Island, and they had some interaction with these Indians, and then they got so appalled by what they saw and witnessed that they fled at night and ended up in San Augustine, Florida, and established that city. So I said, were they the Huguenots who were the French group that established San Augustine? He said, yes. I said, well, I'd like to see that painting then. So he pulls that out. I'm looking at it, and it shows the Indians and all their regalia, and they're dancing around and having some kind of ceremony, and it's got the fire, and it's a typical, either they're having a party or they're having a war scene, and it has some things with the weapons. So I said, gosh, this has got some weapons in it that clearly validates the archaeology that they found. And then I see an altar. And I'm going, I don't know of a Native American tribe anywhere in the country. I know some that had log houses or high places or worshipped, nature in some way, or had totem poles or that kind of stuff, but this one has a stone altar, and it looks a whole lot like the one that I had dealt with in the Middle East. And I'm looking at the picture, and I'm going, is this an altar? Is this stone like something they're sacrificing on? Because this guy's holding babies in his hands in this picture. He said, yeah, they're cutting those babies, they're hacking those babies up in that painting. And so when you look at the details, two of the shamans or chiefs are holding a baby up by the ankles, and they're whacking their heads off and spilling the blood on this altar. Mm. And I'm like, sir, I don't want to be disrespectful of your training and archaeological understanding and history, but I don't know of any native tribe that did what I'm seeing here, unless it was an act of war. And this is really, really unusual. And I've seen this type of scene with artifacts over in the Middle East. And I've seen weapons like this over in the Middle East. I said, are you sure this is Native Americans and not some kind of colony that came from over there? And he was convinced they were native, and I said, well, I'd like to show you some things on a few websites that identify artifacts in the Middle East countries, and especially Egypt and Israel and Syria and Jordan.